Welcome to The Explainer, where we get into some really big ideas. And today, we are tackling a huge one from the world of psychology.
So let's just dive right in. What really drives us? Is it the urge to create or something darker, the urge to destroy? It's a massive question, right? Well, over a century ago, Sigmund Freud came up with this really compelling idea that deep down, there are these two powerful, hidden forces locked in a constant battle inside every single one of us.
And he gave them these epic names right out of Greek mythology. You've got Eros, which is the drive for life, for connection. And then you have Thanatos, the drive toward death and destruction. For Freud, this constant tug of war, this push and pull between creating and, well, uncreating, that's the absolute foundation of our entire psychological makeup.
All right, let's start with the brighter side of the coin. Let's talk about the force that pushes us to build things, to connect with people, to chase after life in all its messy, amazing forms. Let's talk about Eros.
Now, for Freud, Eros, and he often tied this to sexuality. It wasn't just some simple biological thing, not at all. He saw it as this deep, fundamental drive that just screams yes to life. He called it a matter of meanings, almost like it's a barometer for our psychological health, a way to understand what we really need deep down.
And the way he structured this is pretty cool. So at the very core, you've got the libido. That's the raw energy, the fuel for Eros. And this energy, it hangs out in what he called the id. The id is that primal, impulsive part of us that just wants what it wants, right now, pure pleasure. But, and this is a big but, you've also got the superego. Think of it as the internalized voice of your parents, your teachers, society, basically the rule book in your head that keeps the id in check.
And this gets to a really central idea in Freud's work. Our actions are never just actions. From his point of view, our behavior is kind of like a stage where all our hidden, unconscious dramas get acted out. So, using intimacy to get what you want, or withholding it to punish a partner, Freud would say, nope, that's not just about sex. That's an expression of some much, much deeper psychological game being played.
Or, hey, what about the fear of intimacy? Ever wondered about that? A Freudian take would be fascinating here. Whether you're someone who avoids relationships altogether, or you're on the other end, seeking out tons of casual partners, Freud would argue that both of those behaviors could actually be defense mechanisms against the exact same thing, a profound, deep-seated fear of getting truly close to someone.
But of course, for every force pushing us toward life, Freud believed there was an equal and opposite force pulling us away from it. So now we have to turn to the dark side of the story. Let's talk about its counterpart, Thanatos.
You got to remember the context here. Freud was writing this in the aftermath of World War I. The sheer scale of that destruction was unimaginable. And he was wrestling with this really heavy question, why are we like this? Why are human beings so incredibly, relentlessly self-destructive? He felt he needed a theory to explain our undeniable pull toward violence, aggression, and just self-sabotage.
And the answer he came up with was, whoa, it was radical. Even for Freud. He basically said, look, we don't just have a drive for life, we have a built-in drive toward death, an inborn compulsion to return to that quiet, inanimate state we all came from. Pretty wild, right?
And he called this Thanatos. For him, this was the missing piece. It was the explanation for everything, from why an individual might sabotage their own happiness, all the way up to the large-scale horror of war. He literally saw war as a kind of mass suicide, played out on a national stage.
So, here's the key takeaway. These two drives, Eros and Thanatos, they're not just hanging out peacefully side by side. No way. They are locked in this constant, intense internal tug of war. And that battle, according to Freud, shapes literally everything we think and do.
Think about it like this. Every single day, this battle is happening inside of you. Eros is pulling you toward connecting with others, building things, seeking joy. But at the exact same moment, Thanatos is pulling you in the opposite direction, toward isolation, toward tearing things down, toward a return to that final peaceful stillness. For Freud, this was the central conflict of what it means to be human.
And this internal battle doesn't just stay internal. It spills out into our social lives, especially in how we relate to power. Now look, we have to acknowledge some of Freud's original ideas on gender are, well, they're pretty dated. But modern thinkers have taken his framework and reinterpreted it in a really interesting way, looking at it through the lens of social power.
Okay, so take a term like penis envy. Today, analysts would say, let's call that power envy. It's not about anatomy, it's about desiring the social privileges that have historically come with being male. And on the flip side, castration anxiety gets reframed as the fear of losing that power, the fear of being knocked down the social ladder. It becomes a powerful metaphor for our anxieties about status and power.
Which brings us to the big question, right? How do these ideas, which are over 100 years old and, let's be honest, pretty controversial, how do they hold up today?
And out of all of Freud's theories, Thanatos, that death drive, is easily one of the most argued about. I mean, is it real? Do we really have some innate drive that's actively pushing us toward our own destruction?
Well, a lot of critics would say no. Their argument is that when you label self-destruction and inborn drive, you're kind of turning it into this big, vague abstraction. It can make the impulse seem inevitable, something you can't control. And that, they say, lets us off the hook from digging into the real-world causes, and maybe even from taking responsibility for it.
But there's this really compelling alternative idea out there. What if it's not a death drive at all? What if what we're seeing isn't a pull toward death, but actually a profound, terrified reaction against it? The idea is that our fear of death gets all tangled up with a fear of life.
Okay, so follow the logic here. It goes like this. First, we have this profound biological fear of dying. Then, that specific fear kind of bleeds out and becomes a generalized fear of any kind of loss. So to avoid the pain of losing people you love, or losing your success or your joy, what do? You shut down preemptively. You try to become emotionally dead so nothing can hurt you. From this perspective, self-destructive behavior isn't a drive toward nothingness. It's a tragic, misguided defense mechanism against the pain of truly living and loving.
So what's the takeaway here? Well, whether you buy into Eros and Thanatos as literal biological drives, or you just see them as really powerful metaphors, either way, they give us this incredible framework for understanding the human condition. They help explain our amazing capacity for love and creation, right alongside our terrifying capacity for destruction.
And that's really the thought I want to leave you with. As you go about your day, just look around. Look at the world, look at yourself. Which force do you see winning out more often? The drive to create and connect, or the drive to tear it all down? That's the timeless question Freud put on the table, and it's one we're all still trying to answer.